There are questions now about whether the storms that we've seen recently could affect the election and how people vote.
Channel 2's Justin Farmer is here with Battleground Georgia.
Today on Battleground Georgia, the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, specifically in western North Carolina, and its possible effects on the general election. What is going on with the candidates coming back to Georgia over and over, and the latest of the escalation in the Middle East, its impact on our election, as we bring in political analyst Bill Crane. Bill, let's start with Helene. The stories coming out of some in Georgia, of course, in Florida, but really what we're seeing in North Carolina, communities washed away, predictions of no power for 3, 4, 5 months. How do you see this affecting this battleground state that in the polls is tied?
North Carolina was the tightest victory Donald Trump had in 2020. But a big part of that came from Western Carolina, everywhere basically west of Charlotte. Only 2 counties west of Charlotte went for Joe Biden in 2020. That whole red swath right now, it's without power, without roads, very limited disaster relief. You can't vote without electricity. You can't mail ballots without the U.S. Postal Service. So it's incredibly difficult to see in 4 weeks, when they're talking about US 40 being closed through 2025 in the fall, how they're going to get votes in or get votes out of Western North Carolina.
It has been a common theme, these candidates continuing to come to Georgia, and in the past week, we've had everybody here. We have had Biden, Harris, Walz, Trump, Vance, even Trump and Kemp together.
They visited multiple counties, but all of them had suffered Hurricane Helene damage, and unfortunately, in the areas that were hit, they tend to be red areas. Valdosta, Southwest Georgia, Augusta, Richmond County, Columbia, where Donald Trump met up with Brian Kemp. And again, continuing up into the Carolinas and the Florida Panhandle and Central Florida, which also are Republican. All of the areas that really suffered happen to be areas that are strong turnout vote areas for Republican Party and Donald Trump.
Hundreds, if not thousands, of hostages still in the possession of Hamas. Some presumed dead. We know many are not dead. They're still being held hostage, though. You have escalations in the Middle East. You have Iran funding 2 different terrorist organizations now. This thing is getting hotter, not cooler. How do you see this affecting our election?
I believe national security issues tend to play to the Republican Party and to Donald Trump. We are on the anniversary of the week of hostilities beginning when Hamas attacked Israel. It's hard to say what's going to happen on the northern border with Hezbollah and Iran and with Hamas and the Palestine Gaza strips. But all of it, as you just said, is more missiles, more attacks, and more asks on the United States to allow weapons to be used for direct attacks on Iran.
How does this affect our election, Bill?
I think how it affects our election is it leans in favor of a strong military defense and national policy, which would benefit Donald Trump.
Political analyst Bill Crane weighing in on these issues here 4 weeks from Election Day. They're about as heavy and serious as you can get. In a word, sobering, here on Battleground Georgia.
All right, Justin, thank you so much. Georgia's Secretary of State says in some of the hardest hit areas, all election offices have been checked and they're up and running. Most resume poll worker training and machines testing this week. And the state says only 3 polling places will have to change locations. In Georgia, early voting begins October 15th. October 25th is the last day to request an absentee ballot. The election is Tuesday, November 5th. And in North Carolina, on Monday, the State Board of Elections approved a series of emergency measures to ensure hurricane victims can vote. The provisions allow 13 counties to modify early voting and election day voting sites to accommodate local conditions.